The drive back to Millhaven always felt longer than it actually was. I knew every exit on that highway, the faded billboard for a diner that closed before I finished high school, the water tower with the town name painted in letters someone had tried to repaint and given up halfway through. My hands stayed loose on the wheel, but my shoulders didn't. They hadn't been loose since my aunt called 3 weeks ago and told me the hospital was throwing my father a recognition dinner. 30 years of service, chief of surgery. The whole town would be there. She said it like it was an invitation. It felt more like a summons. I hadn't been back in 14 months. The GPS told me to take the exit I already knew. I turned it off. My father married my stepmother, Diane, when I was 11. She was not a cruel woman in obvious ways. She never raised her voice at me. She never said anything I could point to and call a wound. What she did was quieter than that. A slight pause before including me in family photos, a way of saying, our family that had clear edges I stood just outside of. When I graduated from medical school, she told my father it was impressive for someone who had to work that hard. She said it warmly. She smiled when she said it. I smiled when. My father had a gift for not noticing things he didn't want to see. By the time I was doing my residency at Johns Hopkins, Diane had constructed a version of me for the town of Millhaven that I barely recognized. I was the difficult one, the one who never called, the one who had abandoned the family to chase ambition in a city that didn't need me. When I transferred to the NIH's Clinical Research Division at 31, she told people at her book club that I had left medicine, that I couldn't handle the pressure of real patient care, that I was doing paperwork, basically. I heard this from my cousin Renata, who found it funny in the way people find things funny when they don't know how to react otherwise. I didn't correct her. I didn't ask her to pass anything along. I just filed it away with the rest and kept going. That was the thing about me that Diane never understood. I was very good at keeping going. The Millhaven Grand was the nicest venue the town had, which meant it had a parking lot with working lights and tablecloths that weren't plastic. I pulled in 20 minutes before the program started and sat in my car for a moment with the engine off. The September air outside would be warm but not heavy. I could hear faint music from inside, something orchestral through the walls. I checked my reflection in the visor mirror. Not for vanity, just to make sure I looked like someone who belonged somewhere. I went in. The lobby was already full of faces I half recognized. My father's colleagues, their spouses, people from the hospital board, neighbors who had watched me grow up and now studied me with the particular attention of people who have heard a story and want to see if it matches the person in front of them. I got a glass of water from the side table and stood near the entrance to the main hall, getting my bearings. You actually came. I turned. Diane was standing 3 feet away in a blue dress that matched her earrings. She was looking at me the way she always looked at me, assessing, pleasant on the surface, something else moving underneath. Of course I came, I said. It's Dad's dinner. She glanced at what I was wearing. I was in a dark blazer over a simple dress, nothing remarkable. Her expression didn't change exactly, but something in it did. He'll be glad, she said. He didn't think you'd make it. You're always so busy with your, she paused, work. The pause was doing a lot of labor in that sentence. I let it. Where is he? I asked. Talking with the hospital board. You know how he is. She tilted her head slightly. You look tired. The drive from DC is long. I'm fine, I said. Of course you are. She touched my arm once, lightly, and moved away toward a group near the bar. I watched her go and then turned toward the hall. My father was near the far wall with 3 men I recognized from the hospital administration. When he saw me cross the room, something moved across his face. Relief, maybe, or something more complicated. He was 62 and still looked like the man who had taught me to play chess on the back porch, which made everything harder in a way I couldn't fully explain. You're here, he said, and hugged me. I'm here, I said into his shoulder. I didn't know if you'd. I said I'd come. He pulled back and looked at me the way fathers look at children they've been worried about and are relieved to see. Not because something had been wrong with me, because something had been wrong between us for a long time, and neither of us had said so directly, and the relief was about more than tonight. You look well, he said. So do you. Congratulations, Dad. 30 years is something. He smiled, and it was the realest smile I'd seen from him in years. Come sit at the family table, we're in the front. I followed him through the room. The dinner was the kind that follows a predictable architecture: salads, then something with chicken, then remarks from 3 people who each ran about 2 minutes long. My father's colleagues were warm with him. The mayor said his name wrong in the opening speech and corrected himself. A nurse who had worked with my father for 20 years stood up without being on the program and said something so genuine about him that several people at nearby tables set down their forks. I sat between my cousin Renata and an empty chair that eventually held a hospital board member I didn't know. I ate. I listened. I was fine. Diane was at the center of the family table, fulfilling the role she had always been best at, being exactly what a room expected. She laughed at the right moments. She touched my father's arm when speakers mentioned him. She was composed and gracious and magnetic in the way that some people are when they have spent years practicing exactly that. During the salad course, she said to the table at large, not quite looking at me, "It's so nice when everyone can make it, even if it's just for the one night." She smiled. "Claire flew in from wherever she's based now. Research, right? Something like that." "Washington," I said. "Still. Right, the research." She nodded as if confirming something she'd suspected. It's brave, I think, to step back from clinical work. Not everyone can admit when something isn't quite the right fit. Renata went still beside me. The board member on my other side glanced over. My father was talking to someone on his other side and had not heard. I took a sip of water. I said, which was not agreement but was quiet enough to pass for it. Diane moved the conversation forward. She was very good at that. Under the table, Renata found my hand and squeezed it once. I squeezed back. Neither of us said anything. The formal program ended around 8:30. The room loosened after that. People stood, moved between tables. The bar got busier. A small group gathered around my father to take photos. I stayed close enough to be in some of them and far enough from Diane that we didn't have to talk. I was standing near the edge of the room with a coffee I wasn't really drinking when I heard her behind me, talking to 2 women I didn't recognize. Her voice was low, but not low enough. Always been like that, even as a girl. Her mother was the same way. Very driven, very focused on herself. Richard did everything he could, but when a child doesn't want to be part of a family, "She seems nice enough," one of the women said. "Oh, she is, on the surface. But ask her father how many holidays she's missed. Ask him how many times she's called since her last visit." A small pause. "She left her residency program, you know. Johns Hopkins. Couldn't finish it. She's told people it was a choice that she moved into research. But I was there when she called Richard crying. Some people aren't built for that kind of pressure. And that's fine. It's nothing to be ashamed of." I stood with my coffee and looked at the wall across the room. She wasn't finished. I think that's why tonight is hard for her. Watching her father be celebrated for a career he actually completed. 30 years of real medicine. It puts things in perspective. I set my coffee down on a nearby table. I turned around. Diane was about 15 feet away, her back not quite to me, speaking to the 2 women with the practiced ease of someone who had been doing this for a long time. She hadn't seen me turn. I could have walked over. I had words for her. I had always had words for her, stored and sorted and never used. I looked at her for a moment. I walked in the other direction, not because I was afraid. Not because she was right, because I had learned, over many years and in many rooms, that the people who most need to perform your smallness for an audience are never actually changed by being corrected in front of one. They just find a new audience. And I was tired, not of her, but of the specific exhaustion of explaining yourself to someone who has already decided what you are. I went to find my father. He was near the back of the room, finally free of the crowd, standing with a glass of wine, and the slightly dazed expression of someone who had just been celebrated for 2 hours and hadn't fully processed it. I stood beside him and we looked out at the room together for a moment without saying anything. "Good night?" I asked. "Good night," he said. "Really good." He glanced at me. "You okay?" "I'm fine." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Claire, I know this isn't always easy. Coming back. Being here with, I know it's complicated." I looked at him. He was looking at his glass. "Dad, I just want you to know that I see you. Whatever you might think. I do see you." It was the closest he had come in years to saying anything real. It wasn't enough. It was also something. I put my hand on his arm. "I know," I said. We stood there a little longer. I was near the coat check, getting ready to leave. I had a room at the inn 2 miles away. I wasn't driving back to DC until morning when someone across the lobby said my name. Not my first name, my title. Dr. Term. Whitfield? I turned. The woman walking toward me was in her early 60s, silver-haired, wearing a dark suit that had nothing casual about it. I recognized her in the way you recognize someone whose face you've seen in briefing documents and conference programs and the masthead of journals, not personally, but unmistakably. Dr. Patricia Okafor, Director of the National Institute on Clinical Innovation, the person who, 18 months ago, had reviewed my research proposal on adaptive treatment protocols and had sent back a letter that I had read 4 times before I believed it was real. She was here because she was from Millhaven originally, I realized. She had mentioned it once in an interview I'd read. That she grew up in a small town in this part of the state. I had not connected it. I had not known she would be here. She was walking toward me with the direct, unhurried stride of someone who does not perform uncertainty. "I thought that was you," she said, extending her hand. "Patricia Okafor. We've corresponded. I reviewed your Phase 2 proposal." "Yes," I said. "Dr. Okafor. I know who you are." I shook her hand. "I didn't know you'd be here tonight." "Richard Whitfield was my attending physician when I was a second-year resident," she said. "I try to make it back when I can." I had no idea his daughter was the same Clare Whitfield on the trial. She looked at me with the frank attention of someone accustomed to evaluating things clearly. "Your preliminary data is some of the strongest work I've seen come through our office in 3 years. I told my deputy director the same thing last week." The lobby was not empty. The dinner had not fully ended. People were still filtering out, collecting coats, saying goodbyes. Several people from the family table were within earshot. I was aware of this the way you are aware of weather changing. "Thank you," I said. "That means a great deal coming from you." "We're going to fund it," she said simply, as though this was not the sentence I had spent 2 years working toward. "The committee decision came through on Friday. I was going to have my office reach out Monday, but—" She gestured at the room. "Small world," she smiled. "Your adaptive protocol model could change how we approach treatment-resistant cases across 4 disease categories." I don't say that lightly. I heard, behind me and to the left, a silence that was different from the ambient noise of the room, the particular silence of people who have stopped talking in order to listen. "We're also recommending you for the Senior Research Fellowship," Dr. Okafor continued. "It comes with a chair position if you want it. I think you want it." She studied me for a moment. "You left a residency program to pursue this work? Most people don't have the discipline to do that, or the clarity." "I knew what I was trying to build," I said. "I could tell from the proposal." She glanced past me for a moment, toward where I knew Diane was standing, though I did not turn to confirm it. Then she looked back at me. "Your father is a wonderful physician, and it seems the apple didn't fall far." She paused. "In the best possible way." She shook my hand again, said she'd have her office and the formal documentation Monday, exchanged one more brief remark, and moved toward the exit to find someone else she had come to see. I stood where I was for a moment. Then I turned around. My father was standing 8 feet away. He had heard all of it. His glass was still in his hand, slightly lowered, and he was looking at me with an expression I did not have a clean word for. Something between recognition and remorse, and a love that had been there all along but had been very badly expressed. Renata was beside him, and she had her hand over her mouth, and her eyes were bright. Diane was standing just past them. She was very still. The two women she had been talking to earlier were no longer beside her. She was alone, and she was looking at me, and for the first time in 20-some years I could not read her expression because it was not performing anything. My father took a step toward me. "Claire," he started. "Dad," I said it gently. "It's okay." "No." He shook his head once. "No, it isn't. I've let things go on. I should have said things a long time ago. About who you are, about what you've been doing. I knew, and I didn't." He stopped, started again. "I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry." It was not a perfect apology. It did not name everything it should have named, but it was the first real one he had ever given me. Standing up, in front of people, without a quiet exit available. "I know," I said again, and this time the words meant something different. I hugged him, and he held on longer than he usually did. Behind him, I heard Diane say something, a quiet, smooth attempt to reframe the moment, to say something gracious that would absorb what had just happened into a shape she could manage. I didn't catch the words. I don't think anyone was really listening to them. Outside, the air was exactly what I thought it would be. Warm, still end of summer. The parking lot quiet. Renata walked out with me and we stood by my car for a while without any particular reason to. "You knew she was going to be there tonight," Renata said. "Dr. Okafor." "No," I said. "I really didn't. And you never said anything, to anyone, about the research, the fellowship, any of it." "There was nothing to prove," I said. "Not to Millhaven." Renata was quiet for a moment. Then, "Diane's going to be unbearable for 6 months figuring out how to retell this story." I laughed. It was the first full laugh I'd had all evening. "She'll figure something out, probably." Renata leaned against the car next to me. "Are you glad you came?" I thought about my father's face. The way he had said "I'm sorry" standing up. The way Okafor had said you left a residency to pursue this work like it was the most natural thing, the obvious, correct choice, and not the thing Diane had spent 4 years constructing into a failure. "Yeah," I said. "I'm glad I came." The drive back to the inn was quiet. The radio found an old station without me looking for it, something low and familiar, the kind of music that belongs to late nights in places you grew up. I didn't turn it off. I thought about Monday, when the formal letter would come. I thought about the chair position. I thought about my father saying, "I see you," and meaning it for what might have been the first time. There was no dramatic ending, no final confrontation, no speech I had been saving. Just a Thursday night in September in a town that had decided what I was before I had the chance to finish becoming it, and a room full of people who had to revise their picture all at once. That was enough. It was more than enough. I already knew what I had built. I had known for a long time. I just waited for the room to catch up.